So I think there are two things that we strive for in life. One is a sense of purpose, and the other is a sense of belonging. Now, belonging rests fundamentally on being seen. And that's something we're going to explore in this video, along with what I suggest are some elements of belonging. These are obviously not the only elements, and I would love to hear what everyone thinks of other elements of belonging. I've seen two films lately that illustrate well this idea of not being seen, which I think is something that we all experience far too often. One is a film that I've watched with my children, Coco. In this film, the main character, Miguel, has a love for music. It's his soul. He lives through music, which is wonderful. It's wonderful, except that his family has banned music from being played in the family. Anything to do with music has been banned. And the reason for this is that Miguel's great-great-grandfather left the family to pursue music. And so music is aligned with this sense of abandonment from family. In the film, in the beginning, you see Miguel hiding his music from his family. And then finally, when he discovers a famous musician may be his great-great-grandfather, he shares with his family what he wants to do, and his grandmother smashes his guitar on the cobblestone streets, and Miguel runs off, and thus begins the journey of the film. Another film that I've seen several times and I really love because it's so strange and mysterious, but it definitely explores this idea of not being seen. And this film is Lars and the Real Girl. So I won't even attempt to summarize this film because it has such an oddity, which I love again. But in the film, Ryan Gosling, who plays Lars, he's definitely alone and lonely, but it's not fully clear why. And he ends up partnering with a blow-up doll. Now, that obviously sounds a bit ridiculous, and his community finds it to be so as well. However, if you see the film, it's utterly not ridiculous. I've seen several interpretations of this film which suggest that Lars has mental health issues and needs the community to help him heal and come back into reality. I see it a bit differently. Of course, there can be many interpretations to things, but the way I see it, the community needs to be healed, and Lars helps to do that through Bianca, the doll. And the community is a strong community to begin with. It's tight-knit. However, they have very rigid and fixed ideas of how one fits into that community. Lars is not able to fit into this mold. When he brings Bianca into the community is required to expand their notion of inclusiveness, of belonging, of how and who they see as fitting into their group. So it's definitely easy to think about how we are not seen. What would being seen feel like and look like? The journalist David Brooks has written a new book called How to Know a Person: The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. He wrote an editorial which gave many of the teasers from this book. And in that article, he talked about the epidemic of invisibility. And that's a phrase that I've come to really love because I think it captures the true epidemic that we are suffering from. Mostly I've seen people talk about an epidemic of loneliness, but how do you heal loneliness? That seems to be a real challenge. And is someone lonely, or are they just solitary? it seems to be a way harder problem to approach. But to heal invisibility, well, we just attempt to see people. The most obvious way, and also one of the hardest ways to do so, is to give our attention in its fullness. Attention is a real power when you give it and when you receive it. There's a Zen monk, Hyman Suman, who has talked about the idea of bearing witness. Now, when he became a monk in his 20s, he had all of these older people coming to him and asking him life questions that he did not feel at all prepared to answer. So instead of giving them advice, which he didn't have, he just listened. He just sat with them. And what he found is that through doing so and through letting them talk, they came to their own solutions, or resolutions, or sense of decision making. So there's this real way that by bearing witness to others, we can help find resolution for them and even heal. So what I want to do in this video, as I said, I want to talk about 7 elements of belonging. These are really just shards of wisdom from others who are far wiser than I. There's a beautiful Jewish myth which talks about how God sent forth vessels of light, and some were so fragile that they broke, and now it's our job to gather up the light. And that's what I'm doing. I'm merely gathering up the light from others who have come up with some beautiful ideas. So what lays the groundwork for belonging? Well, number 1, slow down. When you rush, you activate your stress response, and there's no way that we can be good to each other when we are stressed. I was recently driving to attend a funeral. I was recently driving to attend a wake, and as I drove there, I didn't know where I was going. I came to a red light. There was a perpendicular street ahead of me, so I could turn right on red, but the traffic was pretty heavy, and I didn't see an opportunity. I needed to compose myself as well to enter the wake and also make sure that I got to the right place. When I slowed down to stop at the red light, this man behind me began honking furiously because I wasn't hurrying up and going fast enough. And what I thought in that moment was, wow, if he knew where I was going and what I was preparing to do, he might not respond that way. The speed of the world that we have created has sped up, and we need to return to a sort of human speed of time. And I think this is one reason that people love things like gardening or taking a walk in the woods, or playing with their kids, because those all happen in the speed of human time. And there's really a sense of rightness and alignment when you work at that speed. And there's a way that you can connect with others much easier. There is a story that I've read, is told in multiple cultures. And a group is on a mission. They're on their horses, and they are at a fast pace, and they're making good speed, and they're hurrying towards their purpose. When all of a sudden the leader stops, and the others are frustrated, and they begin to get impatient, and they say to him, hurry up, we need to hurry up, we need to get to what we're doing, it's really important. And he stays still, and finally he turns around and tells them that he was waiting for his soul to catch up. So again, there's this sense that we need to stop, we need to slow down at least, and allow ourselves to settle into ourselves in order to connect with others. When we slow down with each other, we create a kind of shared space of connection in which we can then see each other better, and we can hear each other better. It's much quieter, like a walk in the woods. Number 2 comes from Brian Stevenson, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. and it is get proximate. Now, Brian's grandmother used to tell him, you can't understand the most important things from a distance. You have to get close. And this notion has served him incredibly well in the criminal justice system. Brian talks about being with people on the margins, people who have been ignored, excluded, disfavored, and how spending time with them, and again, being a witness, can be transformative, and not just to the people that he's with, but to himself. We live under this delusion that our lives and our successes and our paths are separate, but really we are all connected. Our experiences are connected. This getting close with others is a way to actually see another human. And Brian has said, ultimately, what we do to get proximate to those who are disfavored and excluded, what we do to change narratives, what we do to stay hopeful, what we do that is inconvenient and uncomfortable can sometimes be the most meaningful thing we do. Number 3 comes from Krista Tippett, the founder and host of the On Being project and podcast. And this is be intentional. Krista says that a conversation starts before anyone steps into a room. And there is a need for self-awareness and forethought before even entering into a conversation with another person. Intentionality also requires an examination of what some might call our baggage. What emotions are you carrying? And how do those come out through your conversations with others, your questions of others, your vision of others, your expectations of others? And how can you remove some of that and come with less of that baggage? Intentionality is preparing. It's preparing to be with others so that we can be with them in a true sense. Number 4 is get curious. And I take this from Ross Gay, who is a poet, a creative human, and the author of the Book of Delights, and now the author of the Book of More Delights. Ross encourages people to find delight. We don't know everything, and we have to remain curious. And despair is knowing everything, whereas curiosity is the not knowing. It's the I wonder. And that may sound playful and childlike and wonderful, but if you think about going into a conversation with another human, if you think you know what they're going to say, the conversation is already over. If you are curious and open, you may actually hear them. And so getting curious is more than just a suggestion for children or for people playing, but a really important thing for all of us to remember. Number 5 is escape definition, which I take from the beginning of this book, How We Show Up, but it comes up in other things as well. For example, there's a wonderful TED Talk by Teek Milan and Kim Katrin Milan, in which they talk about the many, many ways we can describe the ways we exist in the world. And I'm sure if you think about yourself, there's not just one way you describe yourself. And in fact, that probably seems very limiting. For example, if you are asked at a party to talk about your job, well, I'm sure you don't feel that encompasses your wholeness. And obviously the same is true of those we encounter. Another example of this escaping definition is to think about the messiness of naming. So on one episode of On Being, when Krista Tippett hosted Baratunde Thurston, she talked about the limitations of calling him a comedian. She talked about how she wanted to call him a social creative instead. But again, this whole idea speaks to the fact that titles are not enough to encompass all of us. Are you a doctor? Does that fully encompass you? Or are you a college student? Is that you in your completeness? Of course not. So escape definition. Number 6 comes from Parker Palmer, who is a writer and a speaker and an activist who explores issues of community and social change. And so number 6 is strive for wholeness. Parker Palmer has said, it's an act of rebellion to show up as someone trying to be whole. Now, what does he mean by this? Well, when he was younger, he lived in an intentional Quaker community. And it was a community of what he called radical equality. He had a PhD and he was a dean of studies. However, in this community, he made the same salary as an 18-year-old coming in to cook in the kitchen or someone working in the garden who didn't know what they wanted to do with their life. And he has said, one of the great gifts it brought to me in the middle of struggle was an understanding that the value of a person has absolutely nothing to do with status, power, income, or leverage. The point is, we're constantly shaping reality and the world and shaping ourselves in a simultaneous act. I would say that strive for wholeness connects a lot with, well, these all connect obviously, but connects a lot with this idea of escaping definition, because when we attempt to be whole in ourselves and see the wholeness in others, we're going to see so many layers and complexities and contradictions and humanity, in fact. And the final element of belonging that I'm going to share in this video is contribute, give back. Now, when I began to think about belonging, this was actually one of the first things I thought about, because the communities to which I have felt like I belonged were ones where I then wanted to give back. For example, I was in an ongoing yoga class when I worked somewhere else many years ago. I went to this yoga class 3 times a week at least, saw many of the same people, and we built a sense of community through the shared practice of yoga and through seeing each other so often and through sharing an experience together. And one day when the instructor didn't show up, everyone was trying to figure out what to do. And someone said, well, I can lead the class. And I was surprised to realize that was me. I'm a pretty shy and introverted person, and I don't like to be the center of attention. But I wanted to give to this community. It felt totally natural. It felt completely right. So I did. Robert Waldinger, who's the director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development, has also noticed this. So I would encourage you to take on a countercultural lens. Instead of thinking otherwise, to see humans as a generous species. Really. Research has shown that acting in a generous way activates the same reward pathways as food and other pleasurable activities, which I don't know if I'm allowed to mention on YouTube. So, making soup for your sick neighbor could feel as good as many other things. Strong social networks are associated with greater generosity. And it has been shown that generosity is contagious. In fact, generous acts can actually change the way people see the world, making them value cooperation, interdependence, and their own good fortune. These are my 7 for today. I would love to hear ways and times and experiences when you feel that you belong, and please share in the comments. I am working to create, in this community-minded community, a group that is open and sharing and inclusive and reflective of many different points of view. So again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. So like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.